Hello and welcome back to Toto's Tales. Now, apologies, there's been like a few months where I've not uploaded anything onto this channel. I've been really busy with work and stuff like that and just changes in my life. We're all sorted now, so hopefully this channel for the latter half of the year will be back as opposed to just being a couple of months at the start of this year and then nothing else. So thank you so much for your patience, and we are back today with a video that is a discussion point that is kind of ever growing in the reptile community. It's been present for a very long time. However, because of the nature of the fact that we all kind of constantly are updating our care and making sure that the best things that we provide for our animal are actually the best things that we provide, the topic of should you have a bioactive vivarium versus a non-bioactive vivarium is something that is coming up way more. So this video will discuss the pros and cons of both bioactive setups and non-bioactive setups. You can see behind me here, Rex, my ball python, does currently not have a bioactive setup. However, Ahsoka, my leopard gecko, and then right here in front of me, I can actually see he's poking his head out there. Grogu, my crested gecko, both of them do have bioactive setups. So I'm currently in the good, unique position where I can offer both sides. Now, first, I need to say, what is a bioactive vivarium? A bioactive vivarium is a living ecosystem, basically. It is the closest interpretation of their natural environment as possible. So that means there is real plants, there is a cleanup crew with insects living within the vivarium, a drainage layer in most instances, and basically it's just like a little piece of their environment in a vivarium, as opposed your stereotypical vivarium, which is just more sterile. It's not as natural. So we will start with the non-bioactive side of everything, which is typically what most keepers have. And with the start of this discussion, we'll go with the pros of non-bioactive. And the first one is that it is far easier to initially set up for your animal. So initially, when you're getting your first ever reptile or just a new reptile and you've been a keeper for a while, the focus, understandably, can be on ease and understanding. And if you are new especially, the non-bioactive is probably the way to go because it is far simpler to set up. You just need to get a substrate and then basic decor, as opposed to bioactive, which means you have to do so much research into plant life, into cleanup crew, into the right substrate, how to maintain it, and everything like that. So initially, it's way easier and simpler to just stick with your run-of-the-mill setup. Secondly, and sticking on that kind of thread, is that often it's more sterile for a new animal. When a new animal comes into your house or area, you should probably set it up in a kind of sterile environment initially to see that there's no mites, there's no parasites, they're eating healthy, they're pooping healthy and stuff like that. Often a bioactive setup, you can't do that as well. It's a wee bit harder, and again, it's more for advanced keepers or people who have put in way more time and effort into actually researching and have the confidence to be able to do that. So when they come in, you actually know that everything's okay a lot easier. And finally, in the pros of non-bioactive setup is, again, ease of access. It's easier to clean, it's easier to move things around because nothing actually is set in one particular place. You're going to be taking the substrate out a lot more. You're going to be moving decor a lot more typically. So as a result, if you need to quickly change something, it's way easier to do in a non-bioactive setup. There are, of course, however, cons to non-bioactive setups. One of the first ones that people run into is that in the long run, it's a lot more expensive because you're having to constantly be buying new substrate as the substrate deteriorates. Every kind of 6 weeks or so, you have to do a full substrate clean out, and that's on top of spot check cleaning as well, which has to be maintained at all times. So as a result, you're constantly buying substrate over the lifespan of that animal. That's going to be more expensive. And on that point, maintenance generally is a far bigger upheaval than a bioactive setup because you have to constantly be on it. You have to be constantly checking the substrate that it's okay, and even if the substrate is totally fine for the entire duration it's in there, you still have to be changing the substrate every, as I say, 6-ish weeks or so. So you just have to constantly be more involved with a non-bioactive setup. Then there's just the, in my opinion I should say, it's less nice to look at. A bioactive setup is more natural, it's more flourishing, it just looks nicer, whereas you can have some amazing non-bioactive setups, and I'm very happy with what Rex has just now. But there is always a part of me that goes, no, eventually I need to get him into a bioactive setup, because the main downside I always find with non-bioactive setups is that it's less natural and the animal doesn't seem as engaged as they do with a bioactive setup, because it's not as replicant of their real environment. Understandably, because it's more sterile, because it's more kind of set up as opposed to this natural just little chunk of forest or desert or whatever you're trying to emulate, the animal might show different behavior. And that doesn't mean they're more stressed out or unhappy, because Rex has been with me now for 2 years almost and is living his best life. However, I do feel like I think he'd be even more happier in a bioactive setup. So that takes us on to bioactive. Now, I will start with the pros, kind of continuing on what I just said. Bioactive, just in my opinion, looks way nicer. It looks more natural. It's more enjoyable to see your animal engaging within it. There's the other added thing of like, you also have plants to maintain, and it's pretty cool to see plants growing in Grogu's vivarium, especially. Just seeing how much the plants just take over the space is really cool to see, and then how he changes his environment and his behavior in regards to that is super, super cool, and it's really rewarding. That then continues on to engagement, where the whole experience is far more engaging in my experience. So picking the plants, picking the cleanup crew, adding different cleanup crew throughout it as well. You don't need to just stick with one throughout the entire lifespan of the vivarium. Picking out plants that either do well or don't do well, and you learn from that. Seeing it grow and change every single day, it looks different because the plants will move. It's just more enjoyable. It's far easier to upkeep as well, because once you've initially set it up, you can kind of just leave it. Yes, you should still spot clean every now and then, but generally your cleanup crew are there to help you clean up any waste, and you don't need to be doing substrate changes. You can refresh the substrate if you want, but typically bioactive vivariums can last for a few years. And technically, if you've set it up right or are doing your maintenance properly and kind of just nothing goes wrong, then indefinitely it can keep going. A small other point, which is just nicer, it typically doesn't smell as bad as a non-bioactive setup, because yes, spot cleaning is essential to do with anything. However, even if you spot clean all the time, the smell of a non-bioactive vivarium isn't typically as nice as a bioactive vivarium, which just kind of smells like earth, plant life and stuff like that. However, there is some cons, and again though, I would say cons in both lists are more to your own personal situation, but initially a bioactive setup will be more expensive because you have to buy plants, you have to buy cleanup crew, you have to buy drainage layer equipment, you have to seal it typically as well in other types of vivariums that aren't necessarily built for the high levels of moisture you're going to be having. So the cost initially is quite high. On that, the kind of just knowledge you need to have is a bit higher than normal as well. You need to know about which plants will thrive in each environment, what happens if something goes wrong, what happens if you have a mold infestation, is it good, is it bad? How do we deal with that? What happens if the animal doesn't thrive? You need to know all that before you go in, because otherwise you're just doing a disservice to the animal. A small thing that comes up is typically you will get fruit flies because of the amount of moisture, you're leaving food there, there's the soil naturally. So it's not a big issue, it's just if you don't like flies, they sometimes can go through phases as the vivarium matures and stuff like that. But that's kind of it, if I'm being totally honest. You can probably tell listening to this, much prefer bioactive vivariums. I'm soon going to be hopefully putting Rex into one, and then I have complete setup for all three of my animals. But as I say, this is not a judging area. If you don't think bioactive is the way to go for your animal, then don't do it. Snakes themselves actually can have issues with bioactives in terms of uprooting plants and all that kind of stuff. So we still need to see how well they work. But if you don't want to go with bioactive, then don't. But likewise, if you really want to start your first ever animal in a bioactive and you feel a bit nervous, don't. As long as you do the amount of research required, go for it. There's no negative reasons behind it at all, and it can be really, really fun. Massive thank you again for sticking with the channel if you have. Apologies there's not been any content for the last few months, but I'm back now. planning to do a few more videos this week as well that will get released incrementally. But if you have enjoyed it, please let me know in the comments below, leave a like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.